Greetings, viewers, and welcome to week 10 on the pagan perspective. This week's topic is ghost stories. This is a very fun topic. Kyle has decided to tell you that I have a lot of good stories, and, well, that's true, but none of mine are stories. I don't tell scary stories. I only know things that have happened. I have never seen a ghost except one time in my life, and that was, I may have been about 5 years old, or I may have been 4. Could have been right after my little brother was born, and my grandfather had just passed away. I was very distraught by his death because I did not understand how it happened. And I will tell you exactly what I remember, and I don't remember a lot of things from my childhood except the important things that made an impression and lasted in my memory. And so, what I remember of the way my grandfather died was that he was in the living room with the rest of the family after he had gotten back from the hospital, and everyone was very agitated. And he told me to please go next door and get him a Kleenex. And so I said, sure, whatever you say, and I ran next door, which was in the same house. It was like the mother-in-law suite. All I had to do was run through my bedroom to the other side of the house. It was my grandmother's house, my bedroom, and then my house. So my bedroom was the connector. Just ran through my bedroom, got a Kleenex box off the counter, came back in, and went to hand him the tissue box. But when I went to hand him the box, he was gone. And I don't mean he had died. I mean he was gone. He was no longer sitting there. And everyone told me, the angels took him to heaven. And so I believed that. I believed that he just dematerialized and went to heaven. And I started crying. And of course, later they had a funeral and things like that for him. And I never asked why I remember going back to him just not being there. I don't know what they did with him, or if I just remember it that incorrectly being a child. But I never asked, because I would prefer to remember it that way. And so anyway, it was after his death that it was a dark and stormy night, and that's not even a story. It was a very stormy night, and I was afraid. And so I went to my mother's room and asked her to sleep with her. And her room was at an angle like this to my little brother's nursery. And so he was in there sleeping in his crib, and I was asleep with my mother. And I heard a really loud peal of thunder. It woke me up, and I looked over toward my little brother's room, and I saw almost like purple neon lights, like how neon lights are just the outline of an object that they're showing in the light. There was a purple neon sign type outline of my grandfather. And I knew it was my grandfather because it outlined the clothes he was wearing and his glasses and every detail. If you were looking at him, it basically looked like this, like neon lights everywhere, except this is even not as detailed as it was. But this is what it looked like, except it was all purple, all around him, purple. And that was the first time I had seen a ghost and knew it was a ghost because I knew he was gone. And that was the last time I have definitely seen a figure. It was my grandfather. And my mother worked for Punderson State Park Manor Resort for years when she was a girl, and a couple years ago she started working there again. She doesn't now, but for a while she did again. And if anyone knows anything about Punderson State Park, Punderson Manor in Ohio, it is haunted. And a lot of times people say, oh, but they're happy ghosts, and children aren't interested in happy ghosts. Well, let me tell you, they're not happy ghosts. They all died rather tragically. Many of them died in fires, when the manor burned down years ago, and a couple of them were suicides. One hung himself in the bell tower, that sort of thing. The bell tower's closed off and you can't go up there, but my mom's been there because she was a cleaning lady. That's not even allowed anymore. They've completely bricked it up. But, so they're not happy ghosts, but they're also not mean ghosts, because whenever my mom would work there, it was the kind of thing where the maid would make the bed and then turn around to take out the trash, and when she would turn back, the bed was all messed up. And so she'd make the bed again and then go down the hall to do something and come back, and the garbage would be all over the floor. That sort of thing. And so numerous times my mom would be cleaning a room and the trash can would move. And eventually, after years of this and doing research and finding out who the ghosts were and things like that, my mom would just call them by name and say, "Cut it out, I'm trying to do my job and then I'll leave you alone." And they'd put the thing back and they'd stop moving it and stuff like that. And there's been a time in the library in Burton, Ohio, there's a room dedicated to, a patron of the library, someone who has donated money. It's a reference room kind of thing about local history. And there was an old house in the woods by my grandmother's house that used to exist on what used to be a road. It was called Facey Road. And it all grown over, and now it's just the woods. There's nothing back there. Except my mom and I had gone back there and we found, the remainder of what had been the foundation of a house. The cement bricks were there. So we wondered what else had been there. So we went to this room in the library to look for some local history and find out what else had been on Old Facey Road and when was it populated and things like that. We looked all over this room and we could not find the book that we had seen in the card catalog that said was the one we needed. We had the librarians helping us and everything, and no one could find this book, and so they finally just said, "Oh, it's missing, sorry." And so my mom started looking at something else, like a map of the territory or something like that, which we had found. And I sat down in this big, cushy leather armchair that was in this room. And I just sat down and I was like, man, I really wish we could find that book. We're not going to find that information in any other book. Really wish we could find it. And then, bam! This loud noise just startles me. And I jump and I look around to see what it was, and I realize that a book had fallen off the shelf right next to my head and landed on the floor. And I look down and I pick it up. It's the book we were looking for. How many of you saw that coming? But it's true. It was the book we were looking for. And so I took it to the librarian, and she said, "Yeah, that's the book that we couldn't find. Where'd you find it?" And I said, "It fell off the shelf." And she was like, "Oh, thank James." And I said, "What are you talking about?" And that's when she pointed out to me that that room is dedicated to a man who had died and had donated money to the library named James. And the chair that I was sitting in was also donated in his name. And now every time I go in there, I say hi to James. I don't know if he's there. I don't know if he had anything to do with it. Could have been something else entirely, but I thank James every time I visit that room. Hope you enjoyed those few stories. Kyle, way to build up stories that I don't have. I don't tell scary stories. I tell the truth. I'll see you next week.